Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? It's your host with the most, Mo on TheMoshow Chicago. And boy, do we have a blast planned for you all on this video. Get your pens out, get your paper out, get ready to take some notes because Dr. John Henrik Clarke is about to snap out. Leave us with some very important historical information for those who are history buffers. And mind you, this is a master class. In order to understand religion, you have to understand history. We'll let the master teacher take you away with the session. We'll be back in the middle of this joint. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. I wanted tonight, I wanted to review all of the previous lectures, and we're not going to be here forever. I want to go over briefly what I've already said and go to tonight's lecture, because I have said some things which might be misunderstood, because I have dealt with some old things that you need to think about. And I have dealt with some old religions that are not old in the sense. And I want you to understand something about history, is that history is not as old as you think, because all history is a current event. And every current event is a part of history. And I have dealt with old religions, but what I have dealt with is religions that came before man called them religions. I have dealt with great river civilizations and early man's spirituality, because what you have today that you call religions are carbon copies of original spirituality. And I have dealt with the original copy, where your carbon copies came from. And the early Africans, in building great river civilizations, built a concept which they did not call religion, though your religions came out of them. They called it spirituality. And what they created was a concept of a force of the universe that was much larger than denominations, much larger than the one-dimensional things that eventually man called religions. I had gone beyond the narrow concepts that we live under right now. And it is difficult for you to understand that that age was man's highest spiritual and moral age. And that in seizing upon this age, mostly by foreigners who did not understand the original African creation, the spirituality of man regressed and did not leap forward, but regressed. They organized it into pockets and gave it names. But before the African gave it a name, but practiced it as a great force of the universe, it was then when it had its greatest value, and foreigners picked out of it little pieces and departmentalized it into religious pockets and started war between one pocket and another, then broke the pockets down into something called denominations, then started war between one denomination and the other, and they did service to the spirituality that the Africans created in the great river civilization, starting with the Nile, continue with the Niger, the Volta, the Limpopo, in the Zimbabwe, in the Congo. The Africans created a great spiritual force of the universe, and all of this is misinterpreted so tragically in the TV series The Africans by Ali Mazrui, who's running one of the most unique con games for Islam since the Prophet Muhammad. He's running a better con game for Islam than the Europeans ran for Christianity. For beneath all of it, he is saying that Africa waited in darkness for Islam to bring the light. He's giving you a few good things in order to slip in his game. And you have to know a lot of African history to understand his omissions. And because you do not know general African history, you do not know his omissions. It is in his omissions that he's doing the greatest amount of damage. And you have the illusion that you are getting African history. Because he'll say a few good things that you will agree with and feel good about. Then he'll slip in the damaging things that you won't know how to deal with. And because you do not understand how games are played in our time, you won't examine who's financing it and ask some questions. Why would the Annenberg Trust finance a series narrated by a half Arab? Why haven't we asked some questions? Somebody is buying friendships at our expense. Why we have so few friends in the world? I have said long ago, it wouldn't be surprised to see certain people in the same political bed against us. It wouldn't be surprised to see any people in the same political bed against us, because there's a political naivete that appeared in our history 1680 BC that we haven't dealt with to this very day. And every time people unite against us, we haven't been able to deal with it because we assume that this kind of thing won't happen to us because decent people don't do this kind of thing, and we don't know, we can't separate what is and what is not in this regard. Now let us look at what has gone on before what I have said and why I have said these things. In the first session, in dealing with religions and history before the Christian era, I was trying to deal with that history in Africa that developed before the Christian era, and I was trying to deal with pre-God religions and pre-God spiritual. When I say pre-God religions, And I am not talking about an age of godlessness, and I'm not talking about an age of sinfulness and an age of degradation. This was one of the greatest ages of spirituality known in the history of the world. It was probably one of the highest moral ages known to man. And man did not use the word God at all. And I'm not talking about a godless age. I am talking about an age when man accepted a spiritual force of the universe so all-conclusive that it included everything. And man did not say only man has a soul. He said all living things has a soul, including the cockroach. And he wouldn't step on a cockroach because a cockroach has a soul. And he wouldn't cut down a tree without a ceremony because a tree has life and a tree has a soul. Western man began the stupid concept that only human beings have soul. Western man, in his soullessness, began the concept that only certain people with certain faces and certain color has soul. Western man is the only one that began to make a virtue out of a physical defect, the lack of color. And to make you feel ashamed out of the great virtue of having color. And you do not understand to this day the envy that people have of you because you have color. You are the most beautiful people on camera or walking down the street that God ever created. And yet, he has trained you to apologize for having it. Train you to cringe and to look for his chemicals to put on your face to try to take it off. Now, 3,000 or 4,000 years before he wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window, when you didn't have this nonsense in your mind, you hadn't come in contact with him at all, nor had you come in contact with the Asians when you had your own spirituality intact, when he hadn't interfered with your culture, or you, when you didn't know of his existence, you, meaning African people, had created a spirituality that said every living thing has a soul, including a tree, including a cockroach. And this form of spirituality included everything and included a law, the law of opposites, which to simplify it was the law of complementary, that you complemented everything, that if you had a female, you got to have a male or vice versa. And so you did not ever get into the stupidity of debating the equality of man and woman, because you couldn't have one without the other. And so Africans never would debate the equality of a man and a woman, because it is almost asking whether your mother was your equal, and how would you debate anything as stupid as that? Because if it wasn't for your mother, you wouldn't be here. How silly would such a debate be?
So what do you think about that? Have you learned something that you did not know prior in regards to religion? Yeah, I know. Dr. John Henrik Clarke gives it to you just like that. Yeah, research the material. This man has done this all his life, dedicated his life to providing this information to you. This is what we call a primary resource. Yeah. And just wait. You're going to learn something about Leo Africanus. We'll get to that. Or he'll get to that. And how the Mali Empire was invaded. And the Songhai Empire was invaded. Very interesting. We'll be back, you all. Stay tuned. Paper, pens. We'll be back.
So you never got into that. It was out of this kind of atmosphere of spirituality that the Africans created not only the matrilineal system where the lineage in the family came down to the female, but where he created the world's first female god. Where the Europeans didn't do it then, don't do it now. Where the European had an argument from the beginning as to whether he could accept her, and made her a beast of burden from the beginning. But when the Africans, if he had any debate, it was not whether she was an equal, but whether she, the mother, the giver of life, the sustainer of life, would accept him, not whether he would accept her. And for the most logical thing was to make her one of the first deities in human history. What I'm saying is that he laid the basis for basic humanity and the basic laws of the universe. And when I went to Africa in the rise of Christianity, I was not talking about Western Christianity. I separate Western Christianity from African Christianity altogether, because Western Christianity was and still is a European concoction and a misunderstanding of the elements that the European extracted from Africa to make his concept of Christianity. Because the European extracted from Africa concepts of Christianity which he never understood. And he created an imbalance in the Christian faith that still exists, because the Africans never had any inequality. Now let's go back to the visitors to Africa who did not understand the African concept. The Hebrews didn't understand what the Africans were saying then and don't understand it now. When they visited Africa and began to copy African folklore and began to personify that folklore as part of their story, they began to misunderstand that folklore. And when they, having dwelled in Africa, seeing African stories, began to read themselves into these stories. And when an African prince, Moses, got into difficulty with the royal family, having assaulted the Pharaoh's messenger, got into some difficulty, took up with them, then said to them, if you obey my God, I'll be your leader. Then extracted 10 laws from some African laws that were 2,000 years old before they arrived. And all he did is to extract them from the negative confessions and turn the language around. He could palm these laws off on them, but he could never palm these off on the Africans because the Africans had them all along. The negative confessions were old in Africa. These were the confessions from the school, from the mystery school in the Great Lodge at Luxor. After you finish your training, you stand before your masters and recite these confessions. I have not been guilty of murder. I have not been guilty of violating my neighbor's wife. It's 42. And all Moses just extract 10 and give it to them, and they thought he was giving us a law. He was giving them something. If he took 10 commandments, brought 10 from the hill, then he took 10 up there with him. Because they were in existence all along. It might have been one of the most unique spiritual con games of history. But now, he could never have sold these laws to Africans because the Africans had them all along. And they publicized to the world that they gave the word monotheism. But then some people said Akhenaten gave the word monotheism. Neither Akhenaten or the Jews gave the word monotheism. The African had a concept of an all-conclusive God all along. But they didn't call it God. They call it a spiritual force of the universe that looked over everybody and all living things. So Moses could sell this idea to foreigners, the Hebrews. He could never sell this to Africans because the Africans knew better, and they had a concept of God much higher than the oneness, because their God was larger in contact, and their spirituality was larger. And these golden calf worshippers could buy this, but the African wouldn't buy it in any case. And they would copy African folklore and make out of it a religion. And subsequently, they would sell a lesser concept, but the broader concept continued with the Africans. But the inability, but the Africans many times would buy one concept, but the European would buy another concept. This is why when you go to a white church today and go to a black church, you go into two different religions and two different kinds of spirituality. Now, there wasn't enough time to explain this because both of these people are on two spiritual wavelengths, because they have two different spiritualities. But the Christian story is basically an African story. It's basically an Egyptian story. It's basically the story of Cush, the Punt. Basically the story of people going into Egypt, extracting wisdom from Egypt. And when the story is told of the religions of the world, all of the elements, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, would come out of Africa in the first place. Now, in the lecture on the rise of Islam, what I did not emphasize is the great heroes of Islam: Zayd bin Harith, Bilal, and Anta, a great warrior of Islam, and who, after the Arabs began their internal descent, he called the prayers only twice after the death of Muhammad. And he refused to take the mantle of leadership after the death of Muhammad, who asked him to be the first caliph after Muhammad. It would have been a different kind of religion. And the role that he could have played, and the role that Africans did play after the death of Muhammad, is generally left out of the history of that religion. And this is why it touches me with a bit of anger that many brothers enter the religion almost apologetically, as though it's the Arab's personal property, not knowing that the Arab is the most corrupt element within that religion, and that this is a great religion, and that Africans laid the foundation for it and should claim it, reform it, and make it the religion that it still can be, though it is the least original of the world's religions. But the brothers failed to understand the role of Zayd bin Harith, the role of Bilal, the role of Anta, the role of Khufu the Magnificent, the role of even contemporary Africans in the religion, the role of Askia the Great and other Africans of that faith who took it into the Western Sudan, the role of Tariq bin Zayed, who took it into Spain, the role of Abu Bakr, who took it into the Western Sudan, and the good and the bad that they have done. Once we understand that, and understand that there was a black side to the religion and an Arab side, and that it was both good and bad, but the reform side and the revolutionary side came from the African side. At the last lecture, we were dealing with the empire of Mali, empire of Ghana. And while we left the lecture, it was the entry of Songhai, when Mansa Musa had taken 2 hostages from Mali, from Songhai, and this was after the death of Mansa Musa, Ali Colon, and Suleiman Nar. Principally, Ali Colon had discovered that the Mali Empire was weak, and that having grown weak, he rode close to his country and got across the news that it was time for his country to free itself from the domination of Mali. And when he rode across, he was proclaimed liberator, which means Sony, the liberator. And this, the emergence of the first Sony Ali the first. This is 1335. Now we are looking at Songhai, the last of the great African empires. And this empire would eventually consist of all of the land area that used to be Ghana, used to be Mali, and it would be eventually larger than the continental limits of the United States. But let us look at Mali's last days, called the Melastine. In its last days, after the death of the great Mansa Musa, who went on his famous journey to Mecca and Medina, taken from 60 to 100,000 people, even 50 royal hairdressers, and he only had his favorite wives. He is dead now. This is after 1335. We are dealing with the years between 1335 and the rise of the second Songhai, but we're dealing with Mali's last years. A famous traveler comes to Mali in the 1350s. His name is Ibn Battuta. He has traveled over most of the world of that day. He has been in China. He has been in India. He is a Tunisian. He did not want to go down into what he called the Balad as-Sudan, or the land of the blacks. He is a devout Muslim, and he is pro-Muslim. He has no particular interest in going into the land of the blacks. This is what he calls it. But once he is there, he is interested in to what extent they are good Muslims. And he sees the women having freedom that women are not allowed to have in North Africa. And he sees women going around with no veils. And he wanted to know whether they are good Muslims. And he's told they're good Muslims, as good as any. And he wanted to know why they have so much freedom. And he's told that here a woman can be a good Muslim and be boss of the marketplace all at the same time. Then he asked the king, there's a woman down there arguing right under your window. And he said, that's my sister, and she's arguing with one of her workers. He's supposed to, she gave him something to do, and anyway, he's been selling something, and he's got the returns from the sales, and she's of the opinion that she's been cheated. And that's what the argument is about. And so he's beginning to learn that women in this part of Africa exercise a sense of freedom. And this was the beginning. He did not discover this until later, of a market women's society in West Africa that exists to this very day, the Sandy Society. And this Sandy Society among market women in West Africa is a court in itself. And it is so strong that these women can put you on trial and punish you, and you never know how it was done or who did it. And right now, and some of them are millionaires right now, and they are Muslim. They wear no veil, and they control the marketplace. They control imports and exports and funds, fabulous funds. And they don't have to bow and scrape, and they hire men and sell them and dismiss them at will. And they got no movement because they were born liberated. And that's not anything that they argue about. I'm saying that this existed in the 1300s. And to some extent, it still exists. Now, why do you have this in West Africa and don't have it in East Africa? Because West Africa was Islamized by Islamized blacks, and East Africa was Islamized by Arabs. There's a world of difference. The blacks who Islamized West Africa knew what customs not to tamper with. The Arabs didn't know then, don't know now. You have to understand the difference between who Islamizes different parts of Africa. And this is why the African side of Islam had one projection and the Arab side had another projection. The male chauvinism of the Arabs didn't reach as far, or didn't touch West Africa quite the same way it touched East Africa. All right, now, Ibn Battuta would record all of this, and it is in the Broadway series of his book, The Travels of Ibn Battuta. It can be found in other works because Italian kings, anxious to know something about inner West Africa, commissioned books to be written about inner West Africa. One was a king named Raja, who commissioned an Arab named Il-Fazan to write a book, and this book is called the Book of Raja. And another king commissioned another Arab, Il-Amari, and he wrote a book especially for that king called Roads and Ruins, a very good history of inner West Africa, taking in Mali and taking in ancient, the last of Ghana. All right, now let's go back and see what did this first Songhai Ali do. This first Songhai Ali began to consolidate the country. We're dealing with the years between 1335 and the emergence of the second Songhai Ali, 1464. 1464, his reign is 1464. Here's his ending date, 1492. That's the era of the second Songhai Ali. All right, 1464, the second Songhai Ali, the greatest one, comes to power. And what will he do? He would first free the city of Timbuktu of a bunch of marauders, thieves, fine warriors, still troublemakers in West Africa, called Tuaregs. A mixed breed of people who wore veils, who wore blue cloth with veils, called the people of the veil. Here's why the men wore the veil, not the women, called Tuaregs. They fight well. They don't know a single thing about ruling a city, but they know a lot about wrecking cities. Bunch of thugs, still a bunch of thugs. People go in West Africa, oh, how colorful they are in their blue clothes. And people don't know nothing about the ancient history of them. Never done anything right, but tear things down, but never know how to put anything together. He drove them out of Timbuktu and freed the city of the wreckage of the Tuaregs. And he began to consolidate the land area and to bring the pieces of the empire together. A master engineer, he began to build a 250-mile canal, pulling the empire, connecting various parts of the empire. A great administrator, but not as great as the one who's going to come after him. He's going to have difficulty with the imams, the old Muslim ministers, because he's a fulo. And he belonged to the indigenous African religion of his mother, who came from what is now northern Nigeria. They wanted to know why he will not practice the Muslim faith. He won't practice it because he don't believe in it. And because sometimes they say, well, this is a Muslim country. It's not a Muslim country. The royal family is Muslim, but he's not Muslim. So he gets up in the morning and he announces the 5 prayers of the day. Instead of praying, he announces all the prayers at once and said that I'm busy today. I won't have time to pray to you all. I got other work to do. And finally, the imams come to him and tell him that it's bad for the state that our emperor will not say the prayers. He says, all right, I'll say the prayers. And so they go to the mosque, sneak in and watch him. He say one prayer, as he leans up, and he turns to his minister of state and gives orders. He turns over here and gives orders. He's saying the prayers, he's mocking the prayers, he's doing the work of the state. It's how the emperor's a barbarian. Then when they get on him again, he exiled them to the desert. Get out of here, you're interfering with the state. And then the imams turned to a devout Muslim, Muhammad Ituri, a commoner, the only one who can control the ferocious temper of Songhai. So he calms him down and sends the imams out into the desert. So you go out in the desert and change clothes or horses and come on back. And he's so busy he won't even notice. He don't know one from another anyway. And that's what they do. That calms him down. Finally, when they aggravate him again, he says, go out there and kill him. You know. So they're not killed. He's busy. He's building his famous canal from Walata to all the way to Timbuktu, and he's building 150 miles. And then he stops to fight a minor war in the south with the Musi people who used to control ancient Ghana. And on his way home, his horse got his feet entangled in underbrush crossing a minor stream, and he falls off the horse and he's killed, he's drowned. An inglorious death. For one of the great men born in Africa in the last 2,000 years, Songhai Ba, a great militarist, a great consolidator of state. Now a year passed, fight for the throne. The imams now backs the commoner, Muhammad Ituri. After a year and support from the Muslims, he comes to power. And on his way to his inauguration, the dethroned brother, the sister of the dethroned of the brother that he pushed from the throne, looks at Muhammad Ituri riding to his inauguration. From the balcony, she shouts out, say it is not he, say he has not done this to my brother. And she shouts out a curse word, throne stealer, usurper, thief, ashlier. He stops and pauses for a while and said that I will not let the wailings of this sick woman disturb me. Henceforth, this is the name of my dynasty. Call me throne stealer, usurper, thief, ashlier. And he created what is known as the Ashlier dynasty. And he is known in history as Muhammad Ashlier the Great. He earned the name and he earned the title. And historians call him the greatest civil administrator of all times. And he comes to power. He consolidates all the land area of the country. It is so large that it takes you 6 months to ride over the kingdom. He is a great administrator. Now this is worth emphasizing, because if you can't administer a country, there's no point of having it. He has been prime minister and head of the army for 30 years, so he knows administration. He began to reform the country, weights and the measures. He's also preparing for a trip to Mecca and Medina. He is training people. He is developing a professional army so that professional soldiers can do work, and you don't have to call on farmers to do it. Ambassadors are coming from different parts of North Africa and Southern Europe. Ambassadors from Spain. That comes into his court an ambassador from Tunisia and Spain, and a young man who was later be called Leo Africus. And on his way back to Spain, he is captured by Christian pirates. Remember, in the Mediterranean, Christians were capturing Arabs and Arabs were capturing Christians. And he was captured by Christian pirates, and he was so intelligent, they gave him as a present to Pope Leo. And that's why he got the name Leo's African. Leo's African. And he's known as Leo Africanus. The Pope hired him to write a history of the Western Sudan. And he wrote a history of what was happening in Songhai. And except for having the rivers running the wrong way, it was a pretty good history called a History and Description of Africa. And he introduced the glory of Africa to the Europe of that day. It was great ambassadors, a great state. He described the University of Timbuktu, the University of Sankore at Timbuktu and its great scholars. He described the emperor and what he was doing for the university, endowing great chairs. He described the fact that the universities and the scholars were so great that many times Arabs came to the university to get jobs, but they weren't even qualified. The great masters at the university could teach 10 subjects and teach them well. And the Arabs wasn't even qualified to teach such subjects. This was medieval Africa at its best and at its height, while Europe was rehearsing to go into the slave trade. These Africans were burning and moving. This was Africa taking her last great walk in the sun. Now you can understand why all of this is left out of history. Because when people want to conquer you, they destroy your confidence and your historical memory. They don't want you to believe in this. They don't want you to know when you manage nations, big nations, as big as the United States, and did it exceptionally well. The mayor of Timbuktu was mayor 50 years, Muhammad Khoi. And had to beg for relief. After 50 years, he begged to be relieved from his job. So, anytime you find that kind of stability, man, I've been mayor 50 years, please let me out of the job. So nobody's content, nobody running for the office, nobody trying to take it away from him. That's stability. Nobody else wants the job. You're doing a good job, stay there. That was Timbuktu. That was Songhai at its greatest. Now, he would go on a trip to Mecca and Medina. He would not take 100,000 people like Mansa Musa, just 10,000. And only people who could learn from the trip, mayors of cities. He would study taxation. He would study administration. Then he would hold classes. What did you learn? What did you learn about city administration? What did you learn when you passed through the city, when you passed through different people in their respective countries? He would be declared Grand Caliph of the Western Sudan when he would return. Then when he would return, he would issue his famous proclamation. Except for the reckless darings of Songhai, the empire of Songhai would have spread itself to the border of the Great Sea. This is now the burden and sworn duty of Abubakar, Muhammad Askari of the grave. Each man to his task and his craft, women to bear more sons for the glory of our empire, soldiers to the field of battle. You see, in Jena and Timbuktu, he called the scholars together. He created a classification system now used in the army. He disguised himself as a common man and went into the marketplace to make sure that the common man got his full worth for his dollar, for what he paid for. And the people was making so sure that they gave each person his full measure. So each time you bought something, they gave you your full measure and a little bit over, called the dash. Is the origin of the tip. what you got coming in a little bit over. Today in West Africa, that's known as the dash. A little dash over. He created a professional army. He created a concept of warfare from land to sea, from sea to land, that developed in amphibian warfare. The Germans studied his concept of warfare and developed it integrated into modern warfare. Henrik in his work, travels and discoveries in North and in Central Africa, is the one that called him the greatest civil administrator of all times. Lady Lugard, in her work, A Tropical Dependency, said he was the captain of warfare standing at the crossroads of history, and she said that no human being of the 15th and the 16th century came near him as an administrator of state. For 20 years, he reigned supreme. The last 10 years of his reign, he was blind. And only 3 people knew it. And he disguised this blindness, and 3 confidants schooled him so uniquely. When he called court, they would go out a half an hour and pick up all the gossip and find out who's wearing what color and who's been to where. And he would come out and he would walk so gingerly to the throne and walk to the edge of the throne room and look over and say, compliment somebody wearing blue, compliment somebody wearing a different color, and everybody would think he could see. And would gossip about who's got a new wife, and you couldn't, you would die with as soon as that was a blind man. And finally, he was a little over 80, and he had 50 sons over 50. And they thought they would never come to power, so he was overthrown by one of the sons, and a cousin overthrew the son. Then he was in an island in the Niger, and then he sent for the weakest son he had. And that was a son, not from one of his strategic marriages, because every time he conquered a country, he would marry into the country, and they'll always begot a son. How he managed that, I don't know, but that he did. But he was riding through the old kingdom of Naana, and he saw a girl. This wasn't a strategic marriage. He just liked what he saw, she liked what she saw, and they got together. So this was the son from that marriage. He always called this child his love child. And this son was pampered and weakling and grew up near the palace. He wasn't trained to fight, and so that's the son he sent for. And the son wanted to know his father, why did you send for the least of your sons? Why'd you send for me? So I'll tell you what to do. He said, I'm weak, I don't know nothing, I don't know how to do nothing. He said, I'll tell you what to do. But while he was in Egypt, he studied taxation and he made a decision. I will tax the conquered people no more than I tax the people of Songhai. And he had treated the colonies so well. It was the colonies of Songhai that came to his defense and liberated him and restored him to power. He came to power briefly and put the son on the throne. But the son just couldn't bring it off physically. He lasted only 3 years. And part of the folklore is that there was an old lady who was once one of his sweethearts in the early days, and she said that she refused to die until she see her emperor one more time. And when she saw him riding in splendor on his way back to the palace, she smiled and lay down and died right in the parade room. That was enough for her. That's the folklore. I don't know. Folklore don't have to be true. But after his death, the sons came together, calmed down, because there was some more trouble brewing. And that trouble was coming from North Africa. Now you're going to see one of the great tragedies in the history of Africa. Muslim turning on Muslim. The North Africans, now expelled from Spain, having lost power in the Mediterranean. The Portuguese hadn't taken a small part of Morocco, a little kingdom called Cetra. Europe is getting its courage back again. The maps of the Jewish merchants who were doing trade in the Mediterranean and in inner West Africa having fallen into the hands of Henrik the Navigator, who never went to sea, but be that as it may. Prince Henrik has started a school of training chart makers and navigators, and a young man named Christopher Colon, later called Christopher Columbus, had gone to the same school. He says in his diary, boy, I sailed up and down in 3 years. Europe is awakening now from its long sleep and its lethargy of the Middle Ages. It has come out of its long sleep, but it has come ridden by famines and plagues. It is people poor, land poor, and resource poor. It is hungry, it's looking for something. It has lost all of its sentimental attachment to itself. It has lost its sentimental attachment to the world. It never was Christian and is not even Christian now. It has no Christian sentiment. It has Christian form, but no Christian substance. Hasn't got it now. But it uses the framework to do its dirty work. Europe is getting ready. But Africa is unprepared to deal with that mentality then, unprepared to deal with it now. All right. But the Muslims in North Africa have no respect for the Muslims in inner West Africa. So they are planning to take the gold in the salt in inner West Africa. So now, with Askir gone, with the strength of the West African kingdom, a little week after the death of Askir, the Moroccans send a note to the then king of Songhai, Assak, saying, stop digging gold at the mines at Tagaza, the great salt mine. Salt is so precious that you gave 2 parts gold for 1 part salt. Salt is more precious than gold. And so Asak is sarcastic when he gets the letter. He said, I don't know what Asak this letter is addressed to, because I will not give up 1 inch of the soil of Songhai. And that whoever Asak you mean is surely not I. And he sends a letter back, and he sends them presents, and he sends them more elaborate presents. They couldn't bribe him. So now 50 years pass, but the Moroccans are planning to take that country. Then 1590, a letter is discovered. I have the letter in my file. The letter is from Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I of England, Henry VIII's daughter, only daughter. And the letter is an apology from Ilman Su, a black emperor of Morocco, apologizing to Elizabeth for not answering her previous letter. He said he's been busy planning the conquest of Songhai. Then she sends him a letter that if you help me in overthrowing Antonio of Spain, I will give you the ammunition you need to conquer Songhai. Now you see a black emperor getting ammunition from a white queen to conquer a black country. You see, the Arab was no respecter. You see the North African Arab turning toward Europe to get weapons to conquer the blacks in the South. No respecter of kith and kin, violating the basic rule that governs Islam, is that no Islamic brother should ever lift arms against another. You see him violating it then, and may do it again, right now. Watch as well as pray. Remember, history serves you a purpose only to the extent that you can protect yourself today. Ask some questions. All right, now, things would go on. This is 1590. 1591, Ilman Su finds a leader from Spain named Jetta to head the army, mostly European mercenaries. These European mercenaries handle the European guns of that day. Jetta, for some reason, which I can't explain, I don't know what this has to do with it, becomes a Muslim and permits himself to be emasculated. Why? What's that got to do with it? I don't know. Why he becomes a eunuch, I don't know. But he does. And he pledges loyalty to Ilman Su. And he leads the army across the Sahara. When he leads the army across the Sahara, because a trader from the house of Songhai in Africa betrays in Africa. If you understand, if I say an African Benedictino, you'll understand what I'm talking about. We produce those two. Angry because he's not promoted to some kind of royal business. And he lets them know that if an army could come across the Sahara in a zigzag way, it could hit a water hole every 3rd day, and it could survive. Now, the Moroccans know how to get across that sand. And Jetta leads the army almost to the edge of Songhai, and the people in the desert gets home and tells the emperor, if you would just send somebody to cover up the water holes, maybe they could perish before they get to Songhai. No, he says, there's only 15,000 of them, and he sends 40,000 out there to stop them. That should be enough. But he hadn't figured on one thing. They've got firearms. Firearms that has never been seen in this part of the world. And the bravery of his soldiers not enough. So they try a trick that had always worked. They would stampede great herds of cattle into the enemy's lines. Then they would move in and knock him off. They get the cows ready, right in front of the lines. It's a cloudy day and a clap of thunder. The dumb cows turn in the wrong direction. The moral of the story is, well, you don't give an assignment to a dumb cow. The cow destroyed the wrong army. The men got slaughtered. That army moved into Songhai. And what did they destroy first? The people? No. People destroy first those things that make you feel good about yourself. The University of Songhai, the great temples, the great structures, the scholars, the beautiful things in the country. One general pulled his army out of Timbuktu, Ashley Nur. He pulled them to a place called Sagu in what is present-day Nigeria. Fought for almost 20 years, in and out. Gave the Moroccans a fit till they sent another general named Iswag. Long time. Now, they moved into the city. 1494, they exiled most of the great scholars, including the supreme scholar of the Western Sudan, Ahmed Baba. Ahmed Baba had written 47 books, each on a separate subject, including a book on Arab grammar, still in existence. Many of these African Muslims ran to the army, shouting, "We are your co-religionists, we are your brothers in religion," and they got slaughtered. Muslim against Muslim. Now you can understand why I lose a little patience when the brothers tell me, you know, get all excited about Islam. You got to study its crimes as well as its virtue. Ahmed Baba did the same. Ahmed Baba had a personal library of 2,000 books, each on a separate subject. This is the greatest Muslim scholar of the late medieval world. His work has been solicited in Europe, all over North Africa. A lot of his books were lost in the expatriation across the desert. And when he arrived in Morocco, the students thought that the great scholar had at last come to lecture. They bowed before his horse or his camel. Bless the wind that blew you here. Oh, great messenger, oh, great master, lend us of your wisdom. Allah must be kind to us at last to send you to the doors of our city. Then he had to tell them, I'm a prisoner, I'm not a visiting scholar. When they tried to lift him from his horse, they understood that his leg was broken. They took him to the podium of the great university, and he couldn't stand. They took him to the emperor, Il-Mansur. The emperor felt so ashamed he wouldn't even face him. He talked to him from behind a screen. And the emperor told him a lie. I'm trying to unite Islam. He said, well, why don't you talk to the Turcos? They are Muslims and they're fighting Muslims all the time. Why don't you unite them? He stayed in Morocco. At least he was in prison in Morocco until 1611. And when he came back, he was permitted to go home. The young prince that welcomed him there was now on the throne. And he recalled it. He said that when he bid goodbye, he called him father. When I tried to bid goodbye to my father, I mean father in religion, when a person is elder in your same religion, you refer to him as father. When I tried to bid goodbye to my father, he would not touch my hand. And as his horse turned northward, southward, to go home, he would not even look back to see me crying. He was saying goodbye to the great Ahmed Baba. Ahmed Baba had written 2 books while he was in Morocco, trying to explain his country to those Moroccans, Ibtaj and Mizrael. And today in Morocco, they found the greatest collection of his books, 36 of his, it was 49 books. And it's lined up in University of Fez, the works of the great Moroccan writer, Ahmed Baba. They stole him from me. And if you don't know, you don't know. Now, those Moroccans married African women, and that's called the dynasty of the Amars. And they start fighting among themselves and wrecked what was left of the Western Sudan. They wrecked Timbuktu. And when the French moved into this area, they assumed that nothing great had ever happened in this part of Africa. But when you look at Songhai, what it was and what it was great, this was Africa's last great walk in the sun. After the decline of Nile Valley civilization, the retreat of Rome, the fall of the Roman Empire, African genius in state building was reborn in the Western Sudan, and it lasted for 1,000 years or more. And Africans brought into being 3 great states, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And it was after the breaking up of these states that and the irony of it all, that the last 200 years of the state of Songhai were the first 200 years of the slave trade. And that after this, the difficult part of the slave trade spread inland. But the years of Songhai was Africa's last great walk in the sun. And what they want to take away from you was the confidence that you built a great state, and the memory, the historical memory, that if you did it once, of course you will do it again.
Yeah, I know you all learned something today. Yeah, that's just for starters. Oh yeah. We got something for the religious people out there. Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, Judaism. We got something for you. Men who have dedicated their lives to this historically. Dr. John Henrik Clarke is a beast. Yeah. I love the part about Queen Elizabeth and the Moroccan emperor. You know, after the Moroccans got kicked out of Spain, I had no clue that Queen Elizabeth helped the emperor of Morocco invade the Songhai Empire. That's a lesson for you. They don't even teach you that on a collegiate level. We got a bonus video coming up for you all right now. Thanks for viewing. We'll see you all on the next masterclass session with Dr. John Henry Clarke. Peace out. Thanks for viewing. That's my time. Enjoy the bonus video.
Let's do it. Freedom fighter, black god enlightener. I rhyme nice as skulls to pulpit with hellfire. I slumbered in the hyperbaric chamber after they sentenced me. Now in 2024 they all mention me. Speak gospel, apostle, AMG, G5 wagon, titanium, Harley throttles. From head to toe I'm fresh. What you expect? I'm from Mount Vernon, New York. You can tell how I'm dressed. 100 rock often tap in with the Machty, but probably break fast with saltfish and Aki. Dumpling again, better ask who I am. This is Jihad Akbar, held captive in foreign land. I'm the one who sketched the heavens. Mike is a weapon. Yeah, it's thunder from Kaksaki, leader of the 7. NUP for those who pursue me. I make this look like a Malcolm X movie. That's too much power for one man to have. Point the finger and turn your block into Baghdad. Damn Chad, why you do it? Check the pH level, just as high concentrated alkaline fluids. I'm 5'10". Light skin and handsome, this Rolex on my wrist, every grown man should have one. This is real rap, hip hop, hard verses. My diameter times pi makes my opponents nervous. I dialogue with scholars, 3 scientists and chemists. You still on your 12 Jews law while I invented new rhymes surgically. Solar fast is exact. What's the distance from the sun to Mercury? 36 million miles, 3 + 6. While our born discography was created in the penile. A lot of people say I remind them of Nas, don't compliment, but I would rather mind you a God, the son of man, who proper name is Allah. Sovereign of the universe, the sun, moon, and stars. Prophetic, Asiatic genetics, celestial DNA, thought patterns kinetic. My face alone causes engrams, Dianetics, high voltage. My mind is electric, I'll tear you apart. Master Father Muhammad cracked the atom in 10 million parts. This is art. Brain pans and Willie Burger's back. Shabazz Philly Burger, my OJ, it was black. Mind terror whippers, 88 flippers. Where I'm from, bullets are fly, might hit ya, full clip. This one is extended. I born, I rhyme different.
Listen to me. Listen to me. My brother Eyeball, this is true. I'm telling you. This is my brother right here. DJ SNS, Harlem. You know what I'm saying? The great one. That's what they call me, the great one. My man Eyeball is the truth. This freestyle right here is so crazy.